This is WorkSpan TV. I'm Ryan Johnson from WorldatWork. I'm in the studio today with Doug Friske of Towers Watson, and the topic is the proxy season and specifically Say on Pay in 2011. Doug, welcome.
Thank you, Ryan.
So Doug, how did companies prepare for this inaugural proxy season 2011, the first year for Say on Pay votes? What happened?
Well, a couple of things happened, Ryan. First off is that many companies had been, in a sense, preparing for this event for a number of years. The notion of a Say on Pay vote had been on the horizon, had been talked about. In fact, as a result of TARP, a number of companies actually went through Say on Pay prior to this year, and a few also did so voluntarily. So the point being that companies have been looking for this for a period of years. So they've been looking at certain aspects of their compensation programs that either were misaligned with perception and views around pay for performance or otherwise were considered irritants. So what would those be? Maybe certain perquisites or excise tax gross-ups would be another example, or disconnects between pay and performance. So that was one. Two is that they looked at their disclosures. With the proxy disclosure, specifically the compensation discussion and analysis section of the proxy, companies really took this as the opportunity to make sure they were telling their story to the best degree possible. One change that many companies adopted this year was the use of an executive summary in their CD&A to make sure that the primary elements of their program and the connection between pay and performance was clear and upfront in the proxy statement. And then three, many companies undertook the effort to more directly engage with their shareholders, particularly their large institutional shareholders. And that took several different formats, whether it be one-on-one discussions with large institutional shareholders. Some companies adopted a campaign where they wrote letters to better describe their programs. But in general, the idea being, again, with Say on Pay, being the shareholders' vote, to make sure they're really connecting with their large shareholders.
So then the proxy season came. We had a series of votes. And I know that Towers Watson did some surveying. So what happened? What are the results?
First off, this was in our survey, but just the key result is the vast majority of companies, 98% of companies in the U.S. received a favorable vote from their shareholders. So I would say that that's a signal that executive pay in the United States largely has worked in the eyes of many shareholders, in the sense that shareholders approved the program and they were generally comfortable with the program features that were in place. So that's number one, what we learned. Number two is, though, that there were certain aspects of compensation programs that did concern groups of shareholders, and specifically that being the linkage between pay and performance, and where there was at least evidence, if not overt concern, that there may be a disconnect between pay and performance. So if you look at those companies that either received less than majority support or maybe just slightly better than majority, and more often than not, there was a perception or a concern, again, that there was an appropriate linkage between pay and performance. We also learned that companies could improve the overall perception of their programs through how they communicate with shareholders. We conducted a survey of this, and the number one action taken by companies to prepare for this was improving their communications with shareholders, and I think by and large it worked. It really did help them with the process.
I've read some stuff about this inaugural season, and the question that was thrown out was, what's the right number of approval? What's the right percent? Do you have an answer for that, or do you have an opinion on that?
You're right, Ryan. That's a question a lot of individuals are asking. And there isn't a right answer. Some would say that as long as you have majority support, that's what's being asked for. Others would say something closer to 100%. If you didn't have significant majority support, there may be an issue. I think where we're seeing folks land on this is roughly around 80%. It seems from a number of quarters there's an emerging thought that anything less than 80% may cause you to look a little harder at your programs. Anything higher than 80 means you're in pretty good shape. But we're early in the process of Say on Pay, I believe, in terms of what's likely to come as a result of this new tool that shareholders have. So it's too early to make a final call on it, but 80% is leading the pack right now.
So the inaugural season is, of course, under our belts. What are people saying, or what are your clients doing about 2012? What do they see on the horizon?
Well, a couple of things. One is that I think there's a collective sigh of relief that we're through the first process, and so there's a lot of learning that companies have taken from that. But at the same time, I think there's a fair amount of apprehension still going forward because of a number of factors. First is that the votes around Say on Pay are a function of many factors, like the performance of the company, the performance of the economy, how compensation programs have delivered over time. And so it's hard to say whether or not a successful vote in the first year will automatically lead to a successful vote in the second year. So I think how are companies approaching it? One, with a sense of caution, so optimism for those that received strong support last year, this past year, but still with a sense of caution, trying to understand the process. For those companies that did not get the level of support that they might have otherwise wanted to achieve, I think they're going back and looking at their programs, either the underlying features of the plans or how they're communicated in their proxy statements to see if they can fine-tune those either programs or disclosures. Because I think people realize that while companies have learned through the first year of Say on Pay, activists have also learned from this, institutional investors have learned. Again, it was the first inning, if you will, in a baseball game into what's likely to be a 9-inning game. So I think more to come.
That's a great analogy. I want to thank Doug Friske for coming in today, talking about the inaugural season of Say on Pay. And for World at Work and WorkSpan TV, I'm Ryan Johnson.